Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Welcome, listeners. This is episode 175. Thanks for joining us today at the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan O'Rourke. Looking forward to seeing many of you in Las Vegas. Of course, our FITSE get-together is on the 11th, Tuesday night. Check the show notes for more details on where we'll be at the Mandalay Bay, with the show operating from the 12th through the 14th. Of course, I'll be there, shaking hands, saying hello, enjoying the education, and being at the booth for Core Health and Fitness, amongst other booths. So I hope to see you there. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to being in the desert. Look, it was great to catch up with my longtime friend, Doug Miller. Doug I've known for many years and was a very close associate of Michael Scott Scudder, a friend of mine. In this episode, we're going to chat with Doug about a host of different issues and changes, a little history lesson. Of course, Doug's been an advisor in the industry for many years, over 40 actually, and was one of the first members of the European Council for IHRSA, then now HFNA, Health and Fitness Association. He's advised many different brands in Europe and in the early days in the United States, and his virtual roadshow online is an initiative that he's continuing to expand, and we'll have some details in both the interview and the show notes. So without further ado, let's welcome Doug to the podcast. Well, welcome, listeners. As I was mentioning in the intro, I've had the pleasure of knowing Doug for many years. He's been a friend and an advisor for a long time, and I'm really delighted to have him on the pod today. Doug, where are you joining us from?
Well, right now I'm sitting in my, as I call it, the office. My partner calls it my games room, since I've got a billiard table behind me and a pinball machine. But this is where I normally will be when people are, attempting to contact me when I'm not on the road from 9 to 5. I try to position myself in here, and then 5 o'clock I wander up to the house. But I'm in East Anglia, England, where I've been now for 30 years. Originally from South Jersey, but lived up and down the East Coast. But as a couple of my friends, yourself included, where we call home is wherever we plop the suitcase. That's the way the world runs.
Yeah, tell me about it. Right, you're exactly right. So for those of you that don't know, and I don't know if you do or not, I went to some of this detail in the intro, as Doug knows. Doug was very involved in the beginning days of which is now called HFA, Health and Fitness Association, formerly IHRSA, International IHRSA. And so he was very, as he mentioned, he started his roots, and in the intro I talked about it in the US, and then moved 30 years ago over to Europe, and has advised a number of leading chains in Europe, and was involved in the European Council for IHRSA for many years, one of the kind of originators of the foray of IHRSA into Europe. Doug, tell us and the listeners about those days. So that was heady days of the industry space, and we're talking over 20 years ago or more. What are your observations about the industry in Europe over the decades you've been involved in it?
Well, let's start in the US of A. For those that probably are not aware of the history of well, I'm still going to call it IHRSA because it was then. IHRSA was created by Rick Caro and a lot of guys, the National Tennis Association and the National Court Club Association, and they had a meeting in Sarasota, Florida. And my business partner Ray gave a presentation at that meeting. From that, it was organized also by a man named Mort Levy, who was Chuck Levy's father, who had an old magazine called National Racquetball. And it was thanks to him, thanks to Mort, because he wrote an article about what we had done with this club in Florida, where we'd improved the turnover by 560% in 6 months, which caught the interest of a few folks out there. So we got a phone call from about 120 different clubs and things in North America, asking if we could do that for them. Now you've got to understand, Bryan, at those days there were, IHRSA didn't exist.
Yeah.
There was no industry, as it were. There were no consultants out there for us to emulate. So we pretty much had to, well, not fake it, but we just did whatever we thought we did. And our first client, we actually increased their sales by 450% in 6 weeks. So we figured maybe we were on to something. But that evolved, and it's ironic that HFA is back in Las Vegas this year, because the first 2 conventions were in Las Vegas, and they're honoring a man that I met at that those shows, Augie Nieto, next month, and Rick Caro and John McCarthy, all of whom are really the creators. And there was 278 people there, including the booths. A wee bit different from the 12,000 they're expecting this year. And so with that in mind, so we worked for the first 5 presidents of IHRSA. We did an event up in Cedardale with John McCarthy that became the IHRSA Institute. So we helped create a lot and we presented at all their conferences over the years. And of course, then, as we grew and got it, not better. But I mean, the catchphrase of sales makers has been from day one. We've not been a consultant. We have been membership specialists. And, so when people ask me if I'm a consultant, I say, no, I'm an insultant, at best. But, at the end of the day, we get you results. So I came over to Europe in '89, and I felt like I was stepping into a time machine. But it was a weird time machine because, they were 10 years in the past, but it was a different past. It was like I had gone into a different dimension. I remember walking into, and this was a premium club, walking in, and the locker rooms were hook and bench. There were no lockers. And I'm talking to the owner. I said, well, where's your locker room? He goes, well, this is it. I said, so there's no actually lockers for people to put things in? I said, no, they hang it on a hook, their coat and their clothes. And they put their gym bag underneath the bench. I'm like, okay. But I also, besides that, so I started in the UK and also simultaneously in Stockholm, Sweden. And my client in Stockholm, Sweden, Per-Anders Dagmorn, literally created the industry in that country, doing so many firsts, including, bringing in, different products. I mean, the original step he found and discovered when I met him in '89 at Chicago Club Industry, and he bought what Rich Boggs had and Ray Irwin had on the show, and he put it in a plane and he air freighted it back with him. He took whatever inventory they had, so he was the first to have the step in Europe. And trade shows over here were a little bit different then as well. There was a thing called RecMan, which stood for recreational management, which was very strange to be seeing people sitting in a thing, drinking and smoking cigars and stuff. And then, FIBO, which was just getting started in Germany, in Essen, and, concrete floors, again, bodybuilders, the spandex and lycra show with, walking down the aisle with beers and smoking fags or cigarettes. So, I mean, it was a bit of a culture shock for, the state of the industry. But, throughout my dubious career, Bryan, what I've always attempted to do is to help grow the industry. um, wherever I've been and however it's been done. And I've tried to let the politics put it aside. So I'm more or less friends as best as I can be with everybody and help them. So, so in 2006, due to the contacts I had in Scandinavia, I was appointed the first IHRSA ambassador to Scandinavia, which was a bit odd, an American representing Scandinavia living in England. But, you know how, Americans are with geography, it is a little bit, you're from where? East Anglia. Anyway, so, I mean, it was, well, I mean, what can I say? The way I started that when they appointed me was I basically thought to myself, well, what actually are the benefits of IHRSA? And what I came to the conclusion of is that it was education and networking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get more, sometimes better information just chatting to a guy at the bar than you get from some of the presenters at these conferences, but that's what it is. Anyway, so I created what I called the road shows because I had been now presenting at conferences globally all over the place. I mean, Singapore, Australia, I think the only place I haven't been is South America, Asia. But anyway, so I have made some friends over the years with a bunch of presenters, such as yourself. And, most of these guys, these are some of the best presenters in the world. And so I conned a few of them into going on the road with me for, some time. So we would do Stockholm one night, Helsinki a couple of nights later, Copenhagen, and then Oslo and Vilnius and whatever. And my whole objective within what IHRSA wanted me to do was to grow their members, the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing this, the thing was that if you were an IHRSA club, you got one free registration, and these were mini conferences. Each of was 5 presenters, so each of them did a 1-hour presentation. Different sponsors, Star Trek, Nautilus. I mean, we had all kinds of guys out there, and it grew IHRSA by 360% in a little over a year. And then they adopted this. John adopted this out in the Pacific region for India and for Australia. And the French Association did the same thing. And basically, then 2 years later, they basically got the council together. And I'm actually still on the council. We've got a call scheduled for next week to discuss the next show, which is going to be over here, the European Congress, which will be in Amsterdam on the 3rd and 4th of October. And it should be a great one. But anyway, the shows have been one of the major things where you really see a difference. And the club design over here, it seems to be, and some of these guys over in the States might be offended by this, but seems better. A bit more creative and a bit more, and can be reflected in each country. And you look at the budget clubs in Turkey, McFit, and you compare them to, say, one of the budget chains in the United States, it's night and day.
Right.
These guys have got creativity out the wazoo. In all aspects, and they make it fun. Whereas I think that because so many clubs in the States now are all franchises, they've got to go down there. It seems a much. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's chains over here too.
Yeah, sure.
You've got bigger ones that are in the States.
Oh yeah, basic fit. Yeah, basic fit. Huge.
Renee's group comes to mind immediately.
Yeah, it's got a couple thousand clubs.
Yeah, one person.
Yeah,
I mean, the only one in North America that matches that is David Patchell Evans with Good Life in Canada.
Yeah.
As an individual owner operator.
Yeah, LA Fitness is group too. They're pretty big as well. But there's not many of them.
The reality though is, and the other thing that was really, I mean, because I was in a membership, dealing with in Scandinavia and here in the UK, they had these things instead of memberships. They had tent time cards.
Yeah.
And basically, nobody joined. They all bought visits.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started working in Finland with my client, who I've been with for 27 years now. They had 34 different membership categories, and 34 actual members.
Yeah.
And the same thing in Sweden. He had two more. He had 36. And it took me about a year to trim it down to 3. So I mean, and now that chain is 40,000 plus, 26 clubs. They started with that one club with 34. Nobody had salespeople. Everybody was doing everything.
Right.
And so when we started, it was dedicated salespeople, focused on the prospects, and of course doing the actual prospecting. Because again, in those days, people used this thing called advertising. They would put ads in newspapers. You may have heard of them. These were things that you wrap your old fish bones in. And of course, radio was prevalent. So, some fools did some radio advertising. I shouldn't knock it because that's my degree is radio, television, film.
Yes,
I don't use any of it.
Yeah, you ran a radio station at a college at one point.
I ran the college stations, but I wasn't actual. And if you want, I can actually get into my radio voice, Bryan, now for you. So you're with Doug on WYSP.
Hey, I think you need to go back into that business, do a radio show for the fitness industry with your music mixed in.
Well, I shouldn't, just what the world's need is another podcast, but I will be. I'm finishing my book, which is titled Excelling at Membership Sales. Which is X and then SEL, not the EXC. That'll be coming out in June, and that's when I'll be using the podcast. But I'm not going to be interviewing. I'm just going to be telling stories.
That's great. So let me ask you this.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupt you. I apologize. So the UK, because you're right there, I would argue is probably one of the most competitive markets in the world. Do you think that's a fair statement?
No, Sweden's more competitive.
Sweden's more, but it's got to be up. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Now that you say it, it's got to be close, right? I mean, there's a lot of clubs.
It is right there because the market over here, Bryan. I mean, in the United States, for the listeners there, you've got the YMCA and the JCC centers, and of course some university centers, and then the private sector. Yeah. Now over here you've got the private sector, but then you have what are called leisure centers, and those can be defined as what are trusts, which would be the closest to a YMCA because these are set up as not-for-profits. Yeah. And then you've got the local authorities, which is the local communities, the counties running centers, and they still have you can come in for a $5 for a visit. Yeah. So I mean, the UK market right now is the sublime to the ridiculous, in my opinion. You've got the top end, which are the premium clubs, and then you've got the low ballers, and the middle market is pretty much disappeared. Yeah. The people that are it's either 30 pounds or less. Which is maximum for $36 in the States, $34. Yeah. And a lot are even much less. Yeah. Some are as low as 10 quid a month.
Right.
$15, $14. But then you've got, of course, your bigger players, which are your premium. And in London, you can find
Yeah.
some ridiculous ones. But when you go to actually population density and penetration with clubs and or memberships, Sweden is right there at the top with
Yeah.
over 20% penetration.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
And the UK is running about 14%.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the Swedish market is focused in the Stockholm alone. My God,
Yeah.
that's a competitive market.
Yeah, that is a serious competitive market.
But
yeah. What about Eastern Europe, Doug? I mean, Poland's grown quite a bit.
That is where the future lies in
Yeah.
Europe, in my opinion. I mean, everybody's focusing on Saudi and Dubai and that region. Yeah, and this mainly because they've got the money.
Right.
Eastern European, they don't have squat. But they are working hard, and I'll tell you what, in 10 years, look out.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine who is actually a boxing promoter in April is staging in Kazakhstan, in Astana, the capital city, a major middleweight competition. They love sports. They love competition. They love things that are Western.
Yeah.
That's what they aspire to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I've done a ton. I've recently been doing a lot of work in Bulgaria, which is a very interesting market.
Yeah.
A good club is the same price as a budget. They just aren't used to paying the money, but you do have a premium brand like Pulse, which is a normal price as it would be in America, $50, $60 a month, but they're really nice clubs. That's the market leader in that country. And again, Turkey, McFit, over 120 clubs in 6 years. Yep. And I had done the first 5 pre-sales with them back when they got started. And their history was that their clubs, they charged, $1,200 a year. Right. And they told me what they were building with the thing, and they told me the pricing. I said, "You're not building a budget club. You're building a normal club. Right. This is not budget." But they actually took, and it is more of a budget now, but it's huge.
Yeah.
And that is, again, there are so many opportunities. The rents are cheaper. Yeah. Now they're getting a lot of reconditioned and used equipment. Same thing with Poland. But there is an animal over there that's, not similar to Class Pass, but, it's a thing, where, in my opinion, it's very, very dangerous, where they're going to companies and they're destroying the market, say, in Poland, and they're now in Bulgaria. Ironically, it's a Canadian that owns it. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, it is, dangerous. But, so they struggle with selling regular memberships, and the old messages that we listened to back when we all were getting started, Bryan, when it was the club industry with you and sales makers and Eddie Tock and Sandy Kaufman and Michael Scott Scudder, and Karen Woodard and Brenda. We were trying to teach these people about how retention begins the day they join.
Right.
And it is and you need to create a club culture, and so that they feel like they belong. And they don't have that. Nobody's given them that message yet in Europe.
Yeah.
And when they get that, when they can create the concept of a club and actually have members and retention and a steady income stream, watch their smoke.
Yeah, that's good. So with respect to that app that you mentioned and others, what have you seen over the years with technology? Obviously, labor costs have been more significant and over the last few decades as a factor in Europe. And I think that spurred a lot of automation, a la Basic Fit, for example, and other budget models that really I always saw as innovating more rapidly. But what are your perspectives on how the models have changed from a perspective of tech? What do you see?
Well, the first time that I saw using the word loosely technology in a club was in Norway with what they would call a key club.
Yep.
Which is where they don't have any staff, and very simply, you came in, you paid your fee, and you got a key, and basically you could go and use the equipment whenever you wanted.
Anytime.
They didn't have classes, and it was all cheap equipment. And the way you walked in the front door was set up so that you presented either the key, and then they started implementing technology when they started using QR codes, and they had a door that would open with that, when smartphones came on at the turn of the century, and shortly thereafter with, Mr. Jobs and the iPhone, et cetera, all of a sudden, technology really hit more or less the industry.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've attempted, do you remember Power Sport?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember the old, the old Life Circuit?
Yes.
Where it was, so ahead of their times. But, for those of you that don't know, there was, the Power Gym or Power Sport. You sat in the equipment and it talked to you. It said, it said your name when you put your membership card in.
It's personalization in the early days.
But it cost $100,000.
Right.
10 pieces of equipment.
Right.
But you look at over here, you've got, of course, Milan started over here, which was the technology which eGym is emulating. There's also in Finland, you've her with air resistance, which has got a smart package as well. Personally, I can see that there's a market for that. I'm just thinking, I haven't thought of this for years. They still actually have clubs here in England, which are the exercise tables where you lie down. You go into a small studio and you lie down, and the machine moves your body, and that's called exercise. Shape Master was, one of the ones. And I remember walking into a club over here and, saying, "Oh, this is a gym." But, I'm old school. You can obviously see looking at me, I'm not a young anymore. But I think we run a chance of relying a little bit too much on everything artificial, and we lose the humanity of the definition. The Webster's definition of a club is a space, a meeting place where people engage in activities that they share. And I think you need to have the humanity, human involvement in there. To just go in and lie on a table or to rely on a computer to do your tracking, and I'm reminded of a client I had in Norway where, and again, in the good old days, every club you joined, you had got 3 inductions, complimentary. This is before the term PT or personal trainers. It was just trainers. We had staff, gym staff that helped the members achieve their goals.
Right.
And so they actually, it went down a different path, but they actually, had in their gym, the filing system, the old school with an index card, but they had the photo of the instructor so that you knew who you were working with. And, yes, some apps and things can do that in the gym as well, and your machines can do that, but I don't think anything replaces a human being coming up to you when you're training and saying, "Hey, how you doing, man? Can I help you with anything?"
Right. Yeah, no, I get it. I understand that point of view. Tell the listeners, if you don't mind, Doug, what are you doing with the virtual roadshow now? Tell me what that is. I think you're going to launch an app very soon, right?
Well, the app is actually, let me go back, and I shouldn't be bad mouthing technology because that's where I'm
It's
going.
all right. No, it's a perspective.
No,
But you're not the only one. You're not the only one
I'm
that
not
feels
bad
that way.
mouthing. I'm
You,
holding on to it with both hands. The road shows that I created for IHRSA in 2006 and 2016, with technology and the bandwidths of the internet getting to where they were. And I became aware of this guy by the name of Seth Godin, who I've become an avid follower of, and I even went on an intensive course with him on a personal level. But with that in mind, I realized that why was I spending all this money dragging these presenters around the world, and spending all this money on airfare, hotel rooms. I mean, the bloody bar tabs used to kill me. So I came up with this idea, and that was when the virtual roadshow online was born. And ironically, the very first one I did was in a club called Al Corniche Club in Kuwait City, Kuwait.
Yep.
A beautiful 6-star club. And I basically, with that event, I took, some of my, physical presenters with me. And actually, this guy named Bryan O'Rourke did a live thing coming out on that particular event. You may have heard of him. Brilliant presenter. I mean, not a very nice guy, but a brilliant presenter.
Well, I got to keep up with my reputation,
Yes, it precedes you. But with that in mind, what we did was that we just, had a live group for the networking, part in the club, and we also recorded it. I brought in a proper film crew, and we streamed it live, globally.
Yeah.
I will admit I made some mistakes. I didn't consider these things called time zones. And the fact that, at 10 o'clock in the morning in Kuwait City, no one in Manhattan was going to get up to watch the bloody thing.
That's right.
But fortunately, if you registered, you got a copy of the recording. So that, was my way of making up with it. So then, I basically realized some of the things I did wrong. So I did it again here in the UK. But this time I put it into a TV studio. So I had much better control over the recording, the lighting, sound, audio, and everything else. And the result was better. But again, I still hadn't grasped that time zone. I have since figured out how to have a time machine. But with the app, I don't need it. So I don't need to, rock the world with that bit of technology. But I could do it if I needed to. So, unfortunately, and I don't want to bore your listeners with anything beyond this, I mean, I actually had some health issues there, which kind of took me out of the game for a while. And then this nasty thing called COVID hit, which kind of shut down the world. But I had a lot of time to ponder over those couple of years of what was going on within the industry. And again, for me to, start up sales makers all over again. I mean, I've been in the industry, Bryan, for 46 years.
I know.
I started in 1979. Right. And I've obviously aged since then. So maturity, no, but aging, yes.
Still young at heart, Doug.
I adhere to the Jimmy Buffett philosophy of life, which is growing older but not up.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next phase was during COVID. Club industry attempted to do a convention. And a friend of mine over here, Rob Lander, owns a company called Physical, which is, he builds apps for clubs that will interface with any software out there. And it started as a personal training app, but it evolved. But Club Industry approached him to do an event, or to participate. And I told Rob, I said, under my dead body, am I going to let you spend the $15,000 that they wanted him to sponsor this event? I said, nobody's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but wait a minute, why don't you actually offer to build an app for them so that they can run the show virtually? Which he did. And Club Industry used the app that he built for them for 2 years. And then when COVID ended, they did one last attempt to do it, and then they decided to obviously fold it all up.
Mm-hmm.
But, so with that, during COVID, and, the industry was, struggling, non-existent in some countries, in some areas, countless bankruptcies, clubs losing more than half of their members. And because, the equipment companies couldn't sell anything, so, everything stopped on the production lines, layoffs and everything else. And, you've got some of these associations out there, and I'm like, nobody's helping these people. What's wrong here? And so I kind of decided, you know what? I'm going to try and do something. I've got, a few contacts out there, got a wee bit of knowledge, and I do consider myself relatively astute. I am a bit of a geek. I am an early adopter in virtually everything that comes out there. My office here is loaded with gadgets that have never been used, or I bought and used once. But anyway, so the Virtual Roadshow .app is in front of the online or the app stores right now, getting approval. And it will be available by IHRSA in Las Vegas when it will be launching globally. And what I've done is I've put together a group of some of the best presenters in the world. So I've got 37 different presenters that have agreed to help me with this project. And as I was putting it together, when I hit 30, I realized together, we have over 1,000 years of actual experience. Think about that for a second. 1 millennium of actual knowledge from people that have been living it are going to be sharing that knowledge through my little app.
It's great.
And that is the basic precept. So I call that the Speakers Bureau. And we will begin as soon as the approval comes through from the App Store. The every Thursday at noon GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, I will be uploading or streaming live one of my presenters through the app, which will be going out. So you can be viewing this on your iPad, on your phones, whatever. But that seminar, that lecture, is then instantly archived in the app. So it's available to the subscribers 24/7, 365.
Great.
So they can share it with their staff. So, I mean, have you ever gone to a conference, Bryan, and seen a brilliant presenter, and you go back and you try and explain it to your team, and somehow it's lost in translation?
Yeah, no, that's why I share all my content online as well.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah, people can refer to it, and that's
Yeah,
valuable.
and
Well,
that's
listen,
exactly it.
yeah, for the listeners, just so you know, we're going to have links in the show notes for a bunch of different things. So just look down in the show notes, and we'll also be promoting the app through our social channels when it launches. So, Doug, any final thoughts or pearls of wisdom? You've been in the industry for 40 something years, as you said. You've done all kind of things. You've been around the world many, many, many times. And I would really love to hear any final thoughts or words of wisdom for the audience that you've taken with you or benefited from, given all of your experience in history.
I think one of the things, Bryan, that I've got to mention is that my career focused on bringing salespeople into the industry because they had all their other staff but where all of the income came from was from sales, and they didn't have anybody doing that.
Yeah.
So, and with all of the budgets and everything else, obviously sales have gone into the online.
Yeah.
And most of them don't even have salespeople.
Right.
And people are cutting back on salespeople, which I understand. You can blend it.
Yes.
But I think that, the clubs, if I were going back out on the road teaching what I used to do, and, what I would be telling club owner operators is you can have a very happy marriage of both. You can have that personal touch, because what the potential customers, the prospects, are looking for is to be able to engage with the, with the club, with a group of similar people. And how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
You do it through sharing your stories. So I think that, a really good solid blog where you're engaging and you're giving your stuff, but you're also telling some personal details and spreading that out through your Instagram, through your Facebooks, your LinkedIn's, whatever. And that would link, of course, to your online sales. But instead of having a real sales team there, because most of the clientele now they've already been members of clubs. They know what the game is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't need a tour. They don't need all that. You can do all that online virtually, no problem. So just as you would with any 5-star hotel, you're going to have a concierge. I think that the better clubs should go down that path and have a concierge always on duty to engage with the customers, so that if there is any personal issues, I remember not too long ago, I called a company, looking to do something. And, she answered the phone. Thank you for calling XYZ. This is Anita, or, you're talking to a human being. How may I help? And I just sat back and I was stunned.
Yeah.
A human at the end of the phone? My goodness, does my time machine work?
Yes.
And, so people still want that, I think. So going down the path of, telling your stories online, engaging with your customers, communicating, sharing, having, and making it as fun as you can for them. I would like to kill the guy that came up with workout. It should be a fun out. Then maybe more people would take us seriously. But, the thing is, we've been looking at how, and the other key thing that I hope happens, and with the current administration, I don't know, but I would love to see every government in the world give credit on their, income tax and their tax, things, so that you could write off your health club membership. That would be absolutely huge in terms of us going and waking up that deconditioned market, that 84% of the world that thinks and doesn't know what we're all about. And I was looking and reading an article about gym phobia the other day as well. We need to let the public know that, we're not all a bunch of hard bodies, that we are human beings, all of us. We all sit down and relieve ourselves, and we all do, many different things in life. And I think that is globally. That is a global approach. But the key thing is you can learn, and you always have to keep on learning, and I'm hoping that with the engagement of my app, the Virtual Roadshow Online, my tagline is, we virtually bring the industry to you with AI, actual intelligence. And my mission statement is, we hope to improve the fiscal fitness of your business.
Thank you
That's
for
what
that.
it's all about.
Thank you for that, Doug. So humanize, learn all the time if you can,
Always.
and
Never stop.
never stop. Doug, thanks for spending time. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas here in a matter of weeks.
Absolutely,
So
my friend.
safe travels, and again, wonderful to see you and to share your wisdom and insights, my friend.
Thank you for your time, my friend, as well. Cheers. Have a great one.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.